Hi Marcus,
Hello.
how are you?
Okay. You're the organizer, not Olga.
Well, we have a technical thing at the moment where the only way we have access to Teams is through Stichting app in the Netherlands. And so I'm the only user for that, but we're in the process of getting our own Teams account, which is more difficult than you would think. There's a lot of things to jump through to be able to get that. So once we've got that, she will be
Okay.
able to do all those things as well. But as it
That's
stands, I have to open the meeting.
cool. Um, so let me very briefly go this way. I'm gonna share and I'm gonna act as if starting the presentation.
Yep.
This is the moment. Yeah, I still can see you. That's cool. And you should see my starting slide.
Yep.
Okay, so that works. Then I can stop sharing and wait for you to announce whatever happens.
Perfect. That's it. So yeah, it all works good. So shall we see each other a few minutes before
Yeah.
10? Do you have any questions at
Yes,
all?
I will just stay as I am. I'll just shut out off the microphone and the camera.
Yeah, great. I'll do a very quick introduction, just welcome and then hand over so we can get going with it. If there's a lot of people registered for this, I think one of our most registered for events. Let's see if that matches up with attendees. Sometimes we get like 30 registrations and then like 10 attendees, but we'll see how it
Yeah.
goes. But yeah,
Okay, cool.
bro.
See you
See you
later.
soon. Bye. Can't share their video or audio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce Marcus. Marcus can begin the presentation, and in time for the question and answer, I'm hoping to solve this problem so that we can see you and you can ask questions. We've got a minute to go until 10 o'clock, so we'll just hang on for another minute for any more people. But this is the first time we've used the webinar feature in Teams to do one of our webinars, and clearly there's some kind of permissions that I've missed. I really wish Apple did something similar, because I just hate Microsoft for this kind of thing.
You're hearing me all right?
I can hear you, Marcus. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so just give it, not quite there at 10 yet, and we'll just wait a little bit longer, and I'm hopeful that we can do that. If we struggle for some reason, maybe we need to, any questions you have, great. I'm glad Olga said that you can hear us. Any questions you have, if we can't get your cameras and mics on, we might have to do it in chat, but I'm hopeful that we can figure that out, and I'll go off and look at why it's not working. Anyway, it's 10 o'clock, so we'll begin the webinar. I'd like to thank you guys all for coming. I know it's very near to Christmas and you guys are all probably very busy, but this is obviously the last webinar of 2024, and I'm really pleased with how things have gone this year. As I think you'll all recognise, we've had far more webinars this year than we ever have before, and we plan to do even more next year, and I think we have 3 planned in the first couple of months of 2025. Oh, it's coming up now. It's telling me something about your access, so I'll be able to work that out, I think. So I'd like to introduce Marcus Klaus. He's from the Clinic for Zoo Animals at the University of Zurich. I'm sure he'll tell you a lot more about what he does, but I'm really pleased to have what we would describe as an external speaker here. We've had a lot of speakers from partner organizations, which is fantastic, but I think there's huge benefit from bringing knowledge and expertise from outside as well, especially when there's this level of detail that's been discussed. So I'm really pleased. Thank you, Marcus, for coming and giving us your time, and I'll hand over to you and try and solve our technical issues.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. I see that we have 18 attendees at the moment. My experience is that after the first 5 minutes, there's more and more people, but the trouble is that then I'm already past my most provocative things. So, but I can't stall for time. I thank you all for listening in. My name is Marcus Klaus. I am a co-director of the Clinic of Zoo Animals at Zurich. We are the clinic that provides veterinary service to Zurich Zoo and some other wildlife parks. We also have a part of the animal hospital of our faculty, where we service private owners of rabbits, guinea pigs, tortoises, parrots, etc. In our group, I'm the only one who is not a veterinarian that is diagnosing or treating animals. I'm a veterinarian only doing research my whole life. I've done a lot of research on digestive physiology, and people often say this has something to do with nutrition. A lot of the stuff that has to do with nutrition does not need specific research. It just needs normal thinking. And a lot of what I'm telling you today will be about that, trying to challenge a lot of the traditions that we have in animal nutrition. So the talk will be structured by 3 things: the unchanging challenges in animal nutrition. That's something what most people think nutrition does, keep away certain welfare threats from animals. Then my major part will be on the historic developments of how people feed animals. And that is my main message. We as humans come from such a screwed up position on feeding animals that it has been such a long time to make progress, and I hope to shock you into thinking about why. And my last part will be about the question of where we get food animals from, because a lot of us also manage carnivores and they have to be fed. First, I want to make sure that we know what I consider welfare. That is, I say in this talk because it's my personal stance. I cannot say this is scientifically covered. So evidently, Welfare is about physical health, absence of suffering due to deficiencies, due to intoxications. I think health is also about psychological health. In terms of animals and human care, I mean, it means to me they should have anxiety-free lives and they should have meaning in their lives. And that means they have to have challenges on a daily basis that they can solve with the means that their species has evolved. To keep animals in an environment without solvable challenges could be construed as even more cruel than keeping them in a state of nutritional deficiency, because nutritional deficiency will finish them off soon. A state without solvable challenges can last for the whole lifetime. Most importantly, and this relates to nutrition, welfare is not, for me, anything that is called hedonism, something that is what the animal might want. What the animal wants in terms of food is no indication at all of what is good for the animal. And I typically use a video. So if you give the child the big bag of chips, its welfare will increase immediately. If you have a drug addict that comes to you and says, please give me a drug, and you give him the drug, injects it, the welfare of that individual will skyrocket. What someone wants is no indication of the welfare that I am talking about, and I hope also other people that keep animals are not talking about. It is symbolized by the super adipose orangutan here with a lot of fruits. Just because the animal likes to eat something does not mean this is good. It tells you something about the evolution of taste preferences. Typically, this is for high energy food that tastes sweet because there's lots of sugar in it. And this is not a problem in natural environments where such food is super rare. The evolution of those preferences make sense. But in an environment where these feed are everywhere, you could provide animals with just fruit. These preferences are not helpful at all. So the argument that an animal likes something or doesn't like something should not be part of thinking of welfare when we come to nutrition. The stuff that I call unchanging challenges in terms of nutrition are three things that I will go through very quickly. The first is feed hygiene. It is very clear that in feeding animals, you should avoid moldy conditions, you should avoid mites or any other spoilage indicators, no moldy hay. That is, so to speak, self-evident. We often think about nutrition also as ensuring that the animals don't get a deficiency in a certain nutrient. Just as an example, here some animal groups kept in zoos that have been known to be susceptible to copper deficiency. And if you don't know this and feed these animals diets, like if you would feed these animals diets that would be acceptable for sheep, because, for example, musk oxen, are sheep relatives, then you might trigger copper deficiencies. On the other hand, you also want to avoid toxic situations, over supplementation of anything. I just put some examples of calcinosis, where if you have a rodent like this, these things keep popping up. I trust someone else will let these people in. If you have something like a rodent that eats the pellets that were intended for marmosets living in the same enclosure, they might get an overdose of vitamin D3. Sloths have been reported more and more in recent times to have calcinosis, most likely also because they receive diets that are over-supplemented in vitamin D3. So diets should also protect you from over supplementation. That's the normal thing. That's what your traditional animal nutritionist will do. But now I want to talk about the development, the historical development of how zoo animals were fed. And history is super relevant because any point in time we have a status quo and somehow we say it works. Somebody publishes that the animals have been maintained successfully on this condition. So everybody thinks it works, it means it's good, and then it's put in a book, and then that is what people learn how you should treat those animals. Now, the status quo might change, and people might realize, this works even better. And then we say, okay, now this is the new good that animals have been maintained successfully on. And we change our opinion to that. To the next editions of textbooks, maybe nothing changes, so it's still the same. And then there is another improvement that works even better. And then we think this is good. During all this time, what is evident, there might be a future where things are even better, even more good. But the most important thing that you should do at any of these time periods is to ask whether what happens there is logic and plausible. Because there might be the imaginary future control group where stuff works even better and people thought this was good and now we are here. But the most important thing is, who knows whether this is good? How do you make that statement? It might just be that conditions at the start were extremely bad. And by making an improvement, you went to bad. And at the time you thought, this works better, this is good. It was not anywhere near good. It was just not as abysmal as before. This is how I see animal nutrition. And when we think about the historical development of zoo animal nutrition, I want to stress that at the beginning, let's say 1900, people did not give a shit about the biology of the species. They did not care. How can we tell? We can tell because of very evident stupid things. Carnivores were fed meat when everyone knows they eat prey. You don't have to study biology to know they will not go to a butchery and get a slice of meat. They will eat prey. No adult wild mammal will get milk, yet it has dairy products have been used extensively. Again, you don't have to study biology to know that this is not normal. This is basically a common fact. Animals like herbivores are fed carrots, root vegetables, or cereals. And again, you don't have to study something because have you ever seen a zebra in Serengeti go to bakery? Primates are getting bananas, something that they will never see in their natural habitat. So evidently people use these diet items and it is evidence that they did not care about the biology, they just did that. And we know how stupid it is. Well, do we really know? I played an online internet game this year.
Let's play Feed the Animals and find out.
You might have to turn up your volume.
Hungry. What do you think he wants to eat? A banana, a bone, a piece of bread, or a fish? Fantastic answer. Monkeys love bananas.
And you can see I'm a well-trained nutritionist because I hit the right answers right away.
You are a super player. Tap the stake to end the game, but watch out. Don't let the alligator bite you.
So, did you see that? A carrot for a rabbit that will never in a natural habitat get this kind of food. A steak for a lion that will eat whole large prey. Milk for a cat that would eat small whole prey. If bears would live on honey, they would have long died out because there's no way that they will get enough honey in natural environments. And monkeys and bananas, where do get people Where do people get those kind of informations from? I have a hunch where people get those kind of informations from. They watch stuff like The Jungle Book, and then they think, oh, Walt Disney is probably a good instructor about the biology of orangutans. I hope it's not zoos that promote this kind of false knowledge. But actually, when I was in a German zoo this year and I see a sign for orangutans, look at what how they display the diet, like raspberries in Borneo and bananas, seriously. But all these are diet items that humans love to eat. We like that. And so people had no problem feeding this to animals. And this is how it was at the beginning of the previous century. So historically, we started with anthropomorphic diets. And very quickly, something happened that is a no-brainer. If you feed those diets, you get classic deficiencies. Pure meat does not contain calcium. Fruit does not contain calcium. Cereal products do not contain calcium. And actually, the fact that carnivores had been fed pure meat has led human medical doctors to say that metabolic bone disease in the lions at London Zoo is the original animal model of rickets. Carnivores died in large numbers because of rickets, because they were fed meat, because people did not think about the natural diet, but just thought, oh, they're called carnivores, meat eaters, let's feed them some meat because I like meat on my table as well. The same happened in primates. Huge numbers of monkeys died from rickets. And this is a publication from 1937, as you can see here. Classic diets for macaques: banana, milk, oranges, potatoes, rice, nothing these animals would get in the wild. So what people realized is that, we have especially calcium deficiency, so we need to add a supplement. And then you get rid of the deficiencies. And this is something a lot of people like to do, because you still have all these diet items that we like as humans, and you add some secret powders, makes you feel like the super expert. So let's say from 1930 on, we had anthropomorphic diets that were supplemented, especially with minerals and with vitamins. You can have different ways of doing that. For example, you can have processed meat that already contains the supplement. And very importantly, what happened then, that we had pelleted feed that is supplemented with minerals that provides a safety factor. That was actually introduced into European zoo nutrition about 1960s in this volume of the International Zoo Yearbook we're going to come back to later. And actually, some people studied the effect of this. And you can see here the people investigated metabolic bone disease, or rickets, in primates, in zoos. And they took museum specimens and that were kept at different decades in zoos. And you can see that the prevalence of metabolic bone disease went down, because people realized if you just feed fruits to monkeys, we will get them into calcium deficiency, so we have to supplement. Now, as this has been done, you, so to speak, free these animals from early deaths due to deficiencies, and you can detect other things. One consequence evidently will be that now you have more cancer. Better diets lead to more cancer, because better diets make animals get older, and old age is the major predisposing factor for cancer. So this is just one thing that we talked about this year in a paper in Zoo Biology. Cancer in zoo animals shows you that the husbandry conditions are of such a quality that animals do get old. It's not a negative thing. But the other things that you realize is other civilization diseases now: obesity, caries or periodontitis, that's triggered by high starch, high sugar diets, malfermentations, abnormal behaviors. People now had time to realize these are our problems. Some funny things happen then, that you start building, you're feeding meat and this powdered supplement, and then you add some bones to have some structure, to have less plaque in carnivores, for example. But now it's actually time for the next step. The next step is mimicking natural diets in terms of structure, in terms of nutrient composition. And that means you want to get rid of all these anthropomorphic diet items. You want to feed diets that resemble natural diets in structure and in nutrient composition. And this means you don't want to have one kind of hay as the backup for herbivores, but you want to have different kinds of hays, a large variety of hays, browse, silages, etc., a large variety of forages. No one wants to give milk or dairy products anymore to adult mammals. Cultivated fruit should be replaced by green leafy vegetables. Meat should be replaced by whole prey. Interestingly, for the fish, nothing happens. You see that because humans are used to have a fish on the plate, they never thought about filleting the fish before they feed it to the sea lions or the penguins. But this is what they did with the meat. Meat means filleting a whole prey item before feeding it. With fish, nobody thought about this, I think because of all the work involved and because fish is typically sold also in human markets as a whole prey. So that stays the same. We just know we need to eat fish eater tablets. We want to also feed a variety of invertebrates, insects. We want to get rid of something like cereals and bread basically completely. And we want to exchange pellets that are depicted brown because they are built on cereals by pellets that are depicted as green because they're built on forage meal. Pellets per se are not good or bad. It depends on what they're made of. For me and for our group, the European Zoonutrition Group, very sometimes frustrating thing is this step seems to be culturally so challenging. Abandoning anthropomorphic food items is something that many people do not want to do because nobody likes green leafy vegetables. That's my explanation. Nobody likes to see whole prey being eaten. People love the stuff that they eat themselves. But you know, the tough thing about this is for example, the problem of cultivated fruits that they should be replaced by green leafy vegetables, that is in the zoo literature, that was in the zoo literature before I finished my studies. That's like 30 years ago. That is in the Netherlands, for example, they produced a poster like this for zoo commissaries that symbolize if you feed 3 apples, this is the amount of sugar you're feeding. If you feed these 6 carrots, this is the amount of sugar you're feeding. It has been known for such a long time. Cultivated fruits that you can buy in the supermarket have been domesticated by humans for centuries and centuries to contain high levels of sugar. We like that. Wild fruit that animals eat in natural habitats are not so that you and me would like to eat them. They have much less sugar, they have much more fiber. If you want to imitate wild fruits, you have to go for green leafy vegetables. And like I said, this is knowledge that is 30 years old, but go to so many zoos and you still see the banana in the monkey enclosure. It's amazing. If you think that a frugivore should get apples or bananas, this is like thinking that, oh, these herds of Holstein cows roam the Serengeti, or these flocks of Duroc pigs roam the tropical rainforest. With animals, everybody is familiar that they are domestic or wild, but anything you can buy at the supermarket is domesticated stuff. There is no wild stuff in there. So if you want to replace a wild diet with items that you buy in the supermarket, you can't go by words like fruit, frugivore. You have to think. Actually, in Japan, people have tried to bring home this message in a very easy way in the next video. And I'm showing you this video or these posters to show you that it's not just me who says that. It's been out there for so long.
There have been instances of proboscis monkeys raised in captivity dying after eating bananas. Ripe fruit is that risky for them.
This might be a little bit oversimplified, okay? But I want to tell you, people are producing cartoons like that to tell zoo people stay away from fruit. And, you know, sometimes you can really despair. For example, look at what was done here. This is super. This is about gorillas, and removing milk from gorilla diets leads to less regurgitation and reingestion. Those of you who are familiar with great apes know that this is one of the problems in keeping them, that they regurgitate stomach content and eat it again. It's been shown that it's particularly prominent when in high fruit diets, but also in milk diets. So removing milk is a good thing. But look at the date of the publication, 1999. Are you telling me that adult mammals don't use milk was a new knowledge in 1999? Bullshit! Everybody knew this from 1900 onwards already, who thought about animals. It's amazing how these traditions stuck and stick. And I want to get to this debate from 1966 about zoo animal feeding. This is typically explained as a debate between one guy from Switzerland, Hans Wackernagel, personally the kindest person I've ever met in my life. I met him when he was 80, and we met several times before he died. Wonderful person. He introduced complete feeds, what we typically pellets. Today it would also be extrudats that are mineralized and vitamized so that they deliver everything an animal needs. On the other hand, Heini Hediger, a zoo director, who said, this is so artificial. We want to have whole diet items like fruits, like vegetables, like pieces of meat, so that it resembles more the natural diets of the animals. Now, let's have a closer look what these people were actually recommending. So first, let's have a look at a recipe of this approach here. Pellets. Maize, wheat, barley, oats, peanuts, soybean, skimmed milk powder, nothing. And gorilla, this is for great apes amongst other animals, nothing a gorilla would get in the wild. What is the other side recommending in that same paper? Recommending cereals, grapes, lettuce is maybe the only item that resembles a bit what they eat in the wild. Carrots, apples, grapefruit, bananas, raw eggs in milk, bread, meat. You know what? If you would ask the gorilla what he thinks about this debate, the gorilla would say, what debate are you speaking about? These two people are in complete agreement. You'd have to give a shit about what our natural diet is. You just use stuff that you have in your environment. We can trace this habit of humans that feeding animals in many different examples. I'm using one for red pandas here. So in this book on how to keep red pandas, there's a nutrition chapter. It's the same, by the way, in the most recent edition from 2022. And people show that the natural diet of red pandas is bamboo, and so they make a nutrient target table, what these animals should be fed in zoos. So in the same table, they have the levels for bamboo, and then they make suggestions for the target level of the zoo diet. So for protein, they suggest at the zoo it should be 18%. And if you look at the level in the natural diet, yeah, it's somewhere in the middle. That seems to make sense. What do you think they recommend for the fiber level? Not the middle range of the natural diet, not the lower end of the natural diet, not half the lower end of the natural diet. It's 10%. And you wonder, why is this done? Why does the zoo community accept stuff like that? I can tell you why. One of the authors told me, because at the time when they first made these recommendations, zoo diets had even much, much less fiber. So raising the level up to 10% was already considered daring. And you know what? If you have an animal that is used to a diet with 5% fiber, going to 10%, it will mean the animal won't like the diet. Of course not. We have evolved, everyone has evolved to like sweet stuff that is with less fiber. But why would we do this to animals? So this is the cultural step. And I think if you work at a zoo or any facility, where you are on this line decides whether your institution has a concept of anthropomorphic diets or whether your institution is dedicated to replicating natural biology. And the zoo community seems to be quite inert in this respect. Think about a publication that came out in 1989, where the authors suggested that for red panda diets, you should have fiber levels increasing to 15 to 25%. How long do you think did it take the zoo community and commercial zoo animal producers to produce a diet like that? After this was, for example, published here. And you saw this would be the fiber level of the natural diet of the animal. It was last year that for the first time a zoo feed producer dared or cared to produce a diet like that had a very high fiber level, measured as different kinds of fibers, neutral detergent or acid detergent fibers. This is 30 years later. And that means in all these 30 years, no zoo told their diet manufacturers, hey, produce something that has a decent fiber level that resembles bamboo. Because people don't care for natural diets. This is my only conclusion. There is an important side effect to natural diets. This is nicely demonstrated in this study on rabbits, but you can do the same thing in basically any other animal. So in this study, they had rabbits either fed hay only or rabbits fed a muesli mix only of these extruded products. Now, and they had them for a long time. So these animals here on the muesli mix only, they became obese. These animals on the hay only, they stayed slim. But look at the daily behavior. Animals on the low energy, high fiber diet spend much more time eating because it's not an energy dense diet. You have to eat a lot of it and you have to process it. Animals on the high energy diet, even though they ingested more energy, spend much less time eating. What do you think these animals do in the free time? Solve crossword puzzles? Watch TV, soap operas? What do you want them to do? If you choose a diet like this, what is your concepts, what the animals should be doing? And for me, this is one of the most important things about diets. It is not only and not so much about deficiencies, that the animals get enough calcium, enough protein, because that's something we can have under control. I mean, enough calcium, enough protein, you just choose a proper hay, no problem. But it's the behavior effect of the diet. If you compare these numbers, after 1 week only, the difference between the two groups is already a full day of nothing to do. What do you want these animals to do? And processing hay is something they evolved to do. They have the dental equipment for that. They have the digestive tract for it. What do you want them to do? So evidently, if you compare this to other literature, this would be as described for wild rabbits or for lab rabbits. People make similar conclusions for primates, for example. So it's not only me. This is another paper from this year, completely different author group. And you know that great apes in zoos often have heart problems. So we call it here myocardial fibrosis. And these authors suggest, yeah, you get diets that are high in sugars and starch. You have pelleted food that is high in starch, which means you have a lot of energy intake, but you don't need a lot of feeding time for that, because concentrated feeds like this, you are finished fast. There's little exercise, so to speak. High energy, little exercise, obesity, hypertension, myocardial fibrosis. The logic thing would be not to use diet items like this, but use diet items that imitate the natural fiber levels of these animals. And actually, for example, Amy Plowman, who started doing fruit-free diets for primates in 2013, one of the initial incentives was that you can see here the number of dental treatments they had at their zoo. And in 2002 and 2003, the number of animals they had to anesthetize for caries treatment was just quite high. So they said, we have to do something about the diet. And if you look at the diets and you think about caries, you think about sugar, it was evident the main sugar deliverer in the diets were the fruits. So they cut them out. and the number of dental treatments that the animals needed after that was dramatically reduced. While they were doing this, they also monitored the behavior of the animal during feeding, and this is the aggression that the animals had during feeding times on the original diet. And this is the aggression they had after fruit were removed from the diet and replaced with green leafy vegetables. And you see aggression went down. Well, this is a no-brainer. If you provide something that is not very tasty, just healthy, who will fight for it? You know, think about a group of children's birthday, you throw in 6 jelly beans or 6 pieces of chocolate, everybody will run to get it. You have the same children, you throw in 6 leaves of spinach, nobody will fight for it. But the point is, everyone will eat that if they have to get enough energy. But if there's an alternative, everyone will prefer the alternative. One of the tough things of not making this transition means you keep animals hooked on high fiber, on energy-dense diets, and when they are moved to another facility that maybe has already adopted a more progressive diet approach, that facility will have problems to get the animals used to normal, healthy food. So it's not only spoiling animals for your own facility, but also for the whole community. Now, when people do this change, they realize that obesity, caries, aggression is reduced. The civilization diseases are reduced. They're not completely solved, but they're reduced. So this is the moment where zoo animal nutrition is about mimicking natural diets, which means no cultivated fruit for basically anything except maybe bears when they have to fatten up before hibernation or so. You don't use bread or starchy or cereal products. You don't use milk. If you have pelleted or extruded food, you typically want them to be high in fiber, not just high fiber on the label, and then it's 8% fiber when you look on the composition, but really high fiber, something like 15%, 20%. And you want to have whole carcasses and not meat products. And then, if you have done that, and then you add adequate presentation, what some people might call enrichment, then you might get rid of everything here. The important thing is that enrichment is how you present the normal diet. Enrichment should not be adding some honey somewhere so the animals move to get some sweets or something in addition. Enrichment is how they get the normal diet. It would be about presenting the diet in a challenging and meaningful way, challenging and meaningful, adequate for the species in question. Think about photos like this, animals fed like this. You don't have to study biology to know this is not natural. The parrot will not fly around in the rainforest and find a bowl of all the seeds here. The anteater won't find a bowl. The elephant won't find the whole food for the night in one lump, and the meerkats surely won't find the plate. Why would we do this? Maybe because a lot of humans are used to thinking about food as something that's presented on a plate. And if you think that, you might forget that somebody has to pluck the salad, wash the salad, make the dressing, and you have a third of the plate. And then someone has to dig up the potatoes and wash them and peel them and cut them and fry them, and you have the second third of the plate. And someone has to catch the chicken, kill the chicken, pluck the chicken, gut the chicken, cut up the chicken and fry it, and then you have the third part of the plate. Giving animals the plate only means you deprive them of all the necessities linked to all this around the plate. You could say in humans we have our big moment of hunting gathering once a week when we buy our groceries, but in reality we all know that we're actually spending 8 hours per day doing something that allows us to buy the plate. If we would get the plate on a daily basis without having to work for it, I don't know, this is not a normal situation. But providing the plate without having to work for it means you're taking the equivalent of professions away from the animals. How do you compensate for that? What do you want them to do in that spare time? So making access to food difficult is a standard procedure in several zoos. There are several measures about this. Evidently, for giraffe, we don't want the apples and the carrots, but we want troughs that have a grid so that they can't dip their lips into it. That's the sense of the photos. At Apenheul Zoo, for example, they have these enrichment devices for primates, but it's not extras that are put in there, but it's the normal daily diet that is delivered that way. That's the important thing. And you have different examples of how you can make food delivery for animals a little bit more difficult. So I'm just displaying some videos here. So this would be a tiger that has the pole feeding, and it's difficult for the animal, evidently. It will not get off that chunk of food. I would prefer rather a carcass piece with fur, with skin around it. But you can see the animal has to work. You can invent different mechanisms. There's a lot of creativity. There's so much published on this, and it's in many zoos, it's not used. These animals pull against each other, and so they have to use force all the time while they're trying to get pieces of that food. You can put food on top of things where the animals have difficulty standing, for example, over a water body, and then it will take a lot of work and swimming to get the food down. My favorite example is this here, where some keeper knew what they were doing by putting up this piece of meat. Again, it would be nicer if this would be a piece of carcass with fur attached, etc. But it's exactly in the location where the snow leopard doesn't know how to get to. And it takes this animal half an hour to get to that food. In my view, excellent carnivore husbandry, keeper skills to know what to do to keep the animal occupied. And in the end, the animal will get it. But it takes it a long time to figure out how. Imagine if the food was just put on the stone here, that would be so fast, it would be over so fast, it would be so boring in comparison. This is where I switch presentations. So as a very general rule of thumb, what kind of foods do animals eat? This is a graph that looks a bit complicated, but we'll start. Down here, animals are small, and to the sides, it's larger species. When a species is small, it can live off small things like insects, like nectar, like seeds, because it will find enough of them in its natural environment. When a species gets larger, it can't rely on insects anymore, because if you're primate-sized, go out, you will not find enough beetles and insects to get all the energy you need during a day, because they don't come in big lumps. So you have to go for something else that you can find enough of, like fruit in tropical environments. But if you have the size of a bison, you can't be a frugivore, because there's no lumps of fruit lying around in your environment. You have to go for the stuff that you meet all the time in sufficient quantities, like grass, like leaves. Small carnivores are the same principle. And if you're a larger predator, you might go for small prey if they come in flocks or in schools, like sea lions and the fish they're hunting, or like baleen whales and the krill they're hunting that comes in huge clouds. But if you are a terrestrial predator, size of a tiger, you cannot live off mice. You could, in terms of your digestive physiology, feed your tiger 10 kilos of mice per day, it will be fine. But it will never be able to catch enough of them, because they're too small, they're too evasive, and there's no schools of mice roaming through the forest. The exceptions are the omnivores, the bears, who at certain times of the year in Alaska during the salmon runs encounter conditions where they can find sufficient amounts of small prey, the salmon, or in Scandinavia when the bears eat the berries, when they find a lot of tiny berries, but so many of them that they can live on them. But those are very special ecological situations. It means that these animals, these small ones, are basically searching for their food all the time. And as animals on the herbivore side get larger, they are eating a lot of the time during the day, not as hectic as the shrew down there, but because the stuff is not so energy dense, they have to eat for a long time during the day. On the side of these and the predators that eat the smaller prey, you have either individual hunting events where it's a question of agility, or you have the fewer hunting events where the animals hunt a lot of prey species at the same prey individuals at the same time. But it's a matter of agility, so to speak. Whereas when you go for the large terrestrial predators, they will try to make those hunts not so dangerous, but they will go for larger stuff, large individual hunting events. And in terms of feeding frequency, this means animals down here, you would want to have frequent scatter feeding. You don't do them justice by giving them a meal once or twice a day. For example, we did this in meerkats when they are fed in the traditional way with the bowls. They spend a relatively short period of the day feeding, whereas in a natural environment where they're looking for individual diet items across a habitat, they spend much more time foraging. We used a scatter feeding device that triggered an appropriate amount of food 16 times a day, 16 feedings per day, scattering it around, and the animals then start looking for it. And we didn't know this kind of data down here when we evaluated our data, but you can see that we got the time they spend foraging by these increased number of deliveries of tiny stuff to something that would be considered natural. If you go for the herbivore side, and that's, for example, in great ape husbandry, by now I think it's normal to feed them at least the 5 times that we humans also eat per day. And for the large herbivores, it is constant provisioning of herbivore food. How do you feed those that would have 5, 6, 10 individual hunting events per day? A feral cat the size of a domestic cat would require 6 to 10 mice if it hunts mice. If you have something like the marine mammals, you can mimic their foraging not only by devices, but you can also do this by these show feeding events where they have, so to speak, 2 major hunting events per day. What do you do with the large carnivores? And there we come to the question of how the psychology of the animals meets the feeding practice. So this is not my thoughts. We just put it in a paper of ours. Think about a psychology where an animal hunts 6, 7, 10 times per day and immediately ingests the whole that it hunted. And now you feed it in a way like this. People think that this is the reason why so many domestic cats are obese, because the way that they get food is not tuned to their psychology. On the other hand, an animal that would be in the wild feeding, filling its stomach till it nearly bursts, and then not doing anything for the next 2 days, and then maybe after 3, 4, 5 days consider going hunting again. What happens to such an animal if you feed it just the amount of food it needs every day? Its blood glucose will say, you're fine, you have enough energy, and its stomach will always say, I'm empty, I'm not full, I'm not full. You're creating a situation for an animal like that that does not mimic its natural physiology. And there's more to this kind of feeding. That's the social behavior side. When we're staying with the example of meerkats, people know that if you feed meerkats in this traditional way, they will fight for the food. You can see they are trying to shield the food for conspecifics. What surely does not happen in this feeding mode, you won't have an individual meerkat being the guardian, not trying to get something. Actually, when we started with the scatter feeding, this is the scatter feeding device down here. When we did this, we saw this in 2 of the 3 groups, that they started guarding again when the others were foraging, because they knew there's another 15 times during the day that food will come, and then they change. Scientists have shown in several zoo studies that a lot of animals will cooperate to get food, like the hyenas, where the meat only falls down if both pull at the same time, same device in wolves or lions. But zoos don't use that. The only way something like this is used is in dolphinaria, where you have these devices where several animals have to pull at the same time to get some fish. This is brilliant if you can do that. For carnivores, this is the one example that I found where you have wild dogs fed in a way that they cannot get to the food, but there's this old fire hose attached. And the one dog doesn't really know what to do, but the other one will show it now what you have to do. You have to pull so that your comrades can get to it. It's a wonderful way of feeding. It's a wonderful thing for group cohesion. This will never get boring. And the last video example, and this is close to the finish of the talk, comes from a giant otter husbandry. And this is at night. The keepers are not there. The keepers put fish and water and ropes in a bucket and froze it so that they can hang the whole thing without the bucket on this hook. And this is thawing overnight. The family is asleep, but the mother is here. And this is where the thawing drops come, and she knows what to wait for. And she even knows in which direction to look. And then there's a fish coming down. What does she do? She doesn't eat it. She goes inside. She does not feed her kids. She uses the fish to tell her kids, hey, when it's raining fish, you don't sleep. You come outside and you do your share of the hunting. You come out. She's being a good mother. She's educating kids. She's not putting food on the plate. She tells the kids, okay, now there's prey here. Come out. And it's not only the mother who's being a good mother. It's a few nights later, you can see everything is fallen down already. The father is sitting there and he's enjoying some of the fish. In that night, the camera inside wasn't working, but now he's swimming around and he's checking the parameter. He finds a fish. Then he sees, oh, there's a fish there. Oh, he remembers the fish lying next to that stone. He picks up another one. Now he has 2 fish in his mouth. And now he goes and checks on the family. Now we don't have footage from inside, but you can see after a short time, same situation. He comes out with the family. He still has 2 fish in his mouth. And he first uses the fish in his mouth to direct one of his kids to that fish next to that stone. And then he uses the second one to lure the other young. And he puts that one, places that one also nicely on the shore. And then he eats the last fish himself. Again, he's being a good father. You would not have that social behavior if the animals were fed during the day only at a fixed feeding time, because then everybody would be there waiting for the food. For me, there's 2 messages. One is, look at how the parenting works. They are not providing food for free. They're making their young work. It's not completely unpleasant, but they don't let them sleep. And the other thing is, food is provided in a way that the animals actually have the opportunity to display this behavior. So this is where I think we should be nowadays, mimicking natural diets and mimicking the natural behavior, making food difficult to access, no plates, no bowls, no putting food on the floor, have adequate portions with an adequate feeding frequency, not just 1 or 2 meals per day, and create opportunity for socially relevant behavior. And when we look at all this, I think we could all agree that anthropomorphic diets alone should be a thing of the past. Supplemented anthropomorphic diets, they can provide a certain physical health, but so can diets that mimic the natural diets. You can have even better physical health without cultivated fruit, without cereal products, with high fiber compound stuff. And if you make the food access difficult, you will increase physical health because the animals have to work for that, which is also beneficial. Studies have shown that tigers fed with a tiger pole where they have to climb have better musculature and better skeletal health than tigers that are always fed on the floor. But if you use those feeds that are more difficult to process, for example, a whole carcass compared to a piece of meat, you also give the animals something to do that they are equipped to do. You give them problems that they are equipped to solve, And making food access difficult, you increase that. So in my view, this is the no-brainer solution. Supplemented anthropomorphic diets should be a thing of the past, and this is where we would want to be. This is where I finish this talk. I was a bit slower today than I usually am, so I'm not going to talk about where we get our food animals from. And I thank you all for listening, leaving about 6 minutes for discussion. I will first stop sharing my screen and see how this goes on. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Marcus. That was so interesting. I've got a question, but I don't want to take up the time. So if anyone else has any questions, if you want to put your cameras on, or raise a hand or write it in the message, let me know. Obviously, sometimes people prefer to send questions on later on, and we can see if we can find a way to get answers to those as well. But if you have any questions, do let me know. In the meantime, I'll ask a question. Has any work been done when you've done these comparative studies between, old versus new diets, worse versus better? Any sort of work done on this, on the cost? So
yes, it has. And well, the only cost factor that you could use as an argument for the old diets is if these items are donated to you for free.
Right.
And that is an actual problem.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to pay for them, then switching from fruits and vegetables to high fiber pellets is typically a cost reduction, because you have to account for the water that you're buying with produce, the water that you're buying with an apple. I mean, 100 grams of apples is 85 gram water. So if you do the calculation based on dry matter or based on the energy or based on any other nutrients delivered, this will typically lead to a reduction in costs. Now, if you have facilities that get bread donated, that get supermarket waste, so to speak, donated, that is a different thing. Personally, I would think just because you get bread for free doesn't mean you should feed it to anything. You should, hey, make those people find another way of disposing of this. Why throw this into animals that we like? But I understand that some institutions have that model, and it will be tricky to get away from that model. Although I know several who've made the step.
Yeah, that's certainly something that I've come across at some of the rescue centres I've been to, is that they rely on donations of food, and those donations are usually coming from, as you've mentioned before, supermarkets. So yeah, that would be a challenge, I guess. The other thing, just to mention, you touched on, how long food takes to make. It reminded me of an article I read recently where a guy tried to make a chicken and cheese sandwich completely himself. It took him 6 months and it cost him $1,500. Which I found really interesting, because it's true. As soon as you really think, I mean, I've got some bees in my garden. Not that I'm suggesting honey is great for anyone, but the time it takes to make a teaspoon of honey and the effort and the cost is unbelievable. And I've, every time I grow vegetables in my garden, at the end of it, I think, I'm not doing this anymore. This is the most expensive carrot I've ever eaten, So yeah, I totally, I get that too. Yeah. I don't have any hands raised at the moment. Does anyone have any questions at all? If not,
Yeah.
Oh,
I
don't have. Right, I
Hi,
can't see
it's
you,
Lisa.
but feel free to introduce yourself and ask your
Can you
question.
see me? Hi, I'm Lisa Russo. I deal with internal communications for Anima Natura. So I don't actually have anything to do with the feeding, but I wanted to participate because I thought it would be so interesting to listen to you. First of all, I have chickens in my own garden, and I'm very happy to hear this, because what I do in the morning is I open the gate and I let them go and find their own food. Now, I do give them a little bit of extra food, but I think it's so important for them to go out and find their food. So that's good, isn't it? Also, I was listening very carefully to your presentation, and we have approximately at the sanctuary 250 animals, and we do our utmost best to give natural food and to do everything the way you were saying. It's not always easy. And quite often for us, the problem is a staff issue, because obviously having 250 animals and not very many staff, because you're always trying to cut costs, it's very difficult to be able to implement everything that you were saying. But we do, we have about 15 lions, tigers. We do, we get our own meat, we get our own animals, 2 or 3 cows per week probably. We cut up the pieces and we literally do give a head to the lion, or a leg, or a piece of a body. It's not great to see if you're a bit squeamish, but they absolutely love it. And it does get tied up on a tree so that they can practice hunting. It gets pulled, but this obviously all takes time. So we try our hardest to do it. We also let them fast for 1 day a week, if not 2, but usually 1, so that, because they wouldn't be getting their food every day anyway. So we're really trying hard. But one of the most important things that I would say is you need time and you need staff. And that could be a bit of a problem for some of the sanctuaries, you know?
This is what we hear all the time. I mean, in my real life, I don't feel the reluctance for these diet changes comes only from the keeper staff. I see this just as well in curator level and others, because it's anthropomorphism doesn't stop at one profession, you know. But but for me, the point would be you need to have a culture in your institution.
Absolutely.
That you say, we don't want to accept anthropomorphism. We don't want to treat our animals like cartoon characters. And you say it's not so nice to see. Well, this is something, imagine 300 years ago.
Yeah.
Everybody would have envied the lions, the bison, the cow head, because they would have loved to eat it themselves. There is an educative part in this, that every time you do that, every time you don't feed a banana, you help educating the public about real biology, about real life. And that is also a responsibility. Unfortunately, we feel it a lot in keeper resistance to these changes. And I have the feeling that we have to wait for the next generation. But I mean, I'm also old.
No, we're completely for exactly what you said. So it was an amazing presentation, and I'm going to take that away and share that with the rest of the team. Thank you very much.
Yes, and Olga has the link, and Olga, you can use the link and share that with everyone. Everybody can download this and have a look.
Yeah, we'll share We'll share a recording of the video of the presentation, if that's okay, Marcus.
Yeah, but you can also share the link with the PowerPoint if people want to use parts of it in their institutions. They can use that.
Fantastic. And it might be also, maybe if we could speak after, you mentioned you had a section about where to source some of these foodstuffs. That might be useful. We can include in the follow-up email to the attendees as well.
Yes, the presentation continues on that. It's basically about breed and feed, about raising your own animals that you feed to your carnivores, rather than buying them from somewhere else. But
okay, great.
Everyone can see that.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much again. We've pretty much stuck to time, which is great. And I think this is probably one of the best attended talks we've had. And I'm glad so many people came, because it was really, really useful. But we will take the presentation and the recording of the video, and we'll distribute it to all the other people that would have wanted to be here, but they're probably out feeding their animals. So thank you. Thanks again. And we'll follow up with this, and maybe in the future, Marcus, if you have time, you could come back and tell us more about the work you're doing.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Well, happy Christmas, everyone.
Happy Christmas. Thank you.
Whatever celebrations you have. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.